Two threats within 24 hours. US President Donald Trump has once again threatened India. This time he says he will raise tariffs on India very substantially over the next 24 hours, as according to him, India has not been a good trading partner. He added that we settled on 25% tariff, but I think I'm going to raise that very substantially over the next 24 hours because they are buying Russian oil. Just 6 days ago, Trump had slapped 25% tariff on imports from India and then repeatedly threatened to add more as penalties for buying oil from Russia. India finally responded to the United States of America days after being threatened with penalty tariffs by the USA for buying Russian oil and not so stopping the Ukraine-Russia war. The Indian government issued a strong worded statement in response to the US President Donald Trump's fresh tariff warning. India hit back and pointed out how India started importing Russian oil after the Ukraine-Russia war started and traditional supplies were diverted to Europe, and how at that time US had encouraged such imports by India for strengthening the global energy market stability. India also said that they would keep purchasing cheap oil from Russia despite a threat of penalties. Randhir Jaiswal, MEA spokesperson, said that there would be no change of policy regarding Russia. The defiance of the Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government reflected increasing frustration with a relationship that was once much praised but now has seen some souring recently. The reasons are listed by India in its first statement. First, as mentioned earlier, they were encouraged to import Russian oil. Then China and Turkey, two other major importers of Russian oil, have not faced similar penalties. India is not at war with Ukraine nor Russia, and it will think what is best for itself. So how can both US and EU continue to export trade with Russia while want to impose penalties on India? Now, let us look at the numbers and see the hypocrisy. Let's take up the EU and its trade with Russia. This is happening even after the Ukraine war. In 2024, the total trade in the goods between the EU and the Russia amounted to 67.5 billion euros. Yes, 67.5 billion euros. The EU's imports from Russia were worth 35.9 billion euros. And EU's export to Russia in 2024 totaled 31.5 billion euros. The major commodities the EU imports to Russia are mineral fuels, chemicals, iron and steel. EU's export to Russia comprises of chemicals, food and raw material apart from machinery and transport equipment. This is all part of the European Commission trade statistics, not made up. It's all documented. Now, if we take a look at the USA and Russia trade, it's going to open your eyes. In 2024, US bilateral trade with Russia stood at $5.2 billion. In 2024, US imports from Russia amounted to $3 billion. And the main point, no tariffs on Russia. Now, Eric Garcetti, when he was the US ambassador to India, had just last year said that India purchased Russian oil as we wanted somebody to buy the Russian oil. So then if one were to quote Petroleum and Natural Gas Minister Hardeep Puri, quote unquote, if people or countries had stopped buying at that stage, the price of oil would have gone up to $130 a barrel. That was a situation in which we were advised, including by our friends in the United States, to please buy Russian oil, but within the price cap. Now, this comes as 5-day bilateral trade negotiation between India and the US were to schedule to start from August 25 in New Delhi. India and the United States have been unable to agree to a trade deal despite 5 rounds of formal talks. India has refused to budge on retaining protections for its agriculture, dairy, micro and small and medium enterprises from unfettered American imports. Now, amid Trump tariff threat, Indian Army 1971 newspaper post takes a dig at US support to Pakistan. Indian Army posted a pointed reminder of history. In a social media post titled, "This Day, That Year, Build Up a War, 5th August, 1971, Know Your Facts." The Army shared an old newspaper clipping with caption, US arms worth 2 billion shipped to Pakistan since 54. 1971 war to now post-op Sindoor. So what is US angling for? What explains Trump flip-flop on Russia? And what does it mean for India and its policy of strategic autonomy? These are the issues I am going to raise with Ambassador Shashank, former Foreign Secretary, Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, and Professor Swaran Singh. Let me straight away go to Ambassador Shashank. And Professor, two threats in 24 hours. Please decode it for our viewers. Where does it put India and US relationship?
Well, India and US have been improving their relations ever since they started on the path of moving towards a strategic partnership. And we started first steps, then more steps, and then finally we moved to a strategic partnership. And one of the results was Quad relationship, and also Indo-Pacific, which included India's concerns. I think all these things have given an impression to the Western countries that India is very much on their side. It is only a matter of time when the legacy issues of India with Russia and whatever other things they were doing with China, they would be sorted out in a way that it will be beneficial for the West. And already they had brought about attrition of the Russian military base, and they were expecting that Russia would now become a very weak power, and China needs to be blocked right now, because once they move in the next few years, already it's too difficult, maybe too late already, but they expect that this is the time when India should be cornered, Russia should be cornered, and China should be also told that it cannot overtake the United States, whatever its plans are. Now, India stopped buying oil from Venezuela and Iran in the first term of President Trump. And secondly, we have to keep in mind that President Trump has always spoken for the last 40 years of tariffs as an instrument to bring about better balance of trade in favor of the United States. Though it may not be accepted by other economists, but President Trump says that he has made billions by continuing with his own economic philosophical thought. In the 30s and 40s, in 1930s and 40s, around the Second World War, we had this thought of the tariff barriers to be improved. Then later on, we spent 80, 90 years to bring them down, and America took a very strong part in that. So GATT negotiations, WTO negotiations, etc., etc. And they brought in China also into the basket by expecting that China would become like a carbon copy of Taiwan or USA or something like this. But it did not happen. China said that now they are going to become number one country in the world. And already, I think in about 35, 36 technologies, they have taken unbeatable lead over the United States. And so therefore, US is finding that now what India, where so long as it was behaving in a quieter manner, its progress was not that strong, and it was willing to listen to its Western traditional partners and telling them that it is only legacy issues with the Russia. Overall, ultimately, they will come closer to the West. But India's hope was that perhaps the relations between Russia and USA would also improve under President Trump, who had spoken very strongly that he will bring to an end the Ukraine-Russia war within 24 hours because he had good relations with President Putin. So now what happens is that this is really mainly a result of the feeling that President Trump is so miffed with President Putin of Russia that is the Russia-US relationship, which is reflecting now on India's trade with USA. India is quite willing to go on the basis of 25% tariffs for its products to USA and to see which ones will get 25%, which one will get less, and then try to negotiate and see how things can work out.
Okay.
But India has not taken the path what USA, what European Union, Japan, etc. have taken, that they will put investments in USA. India has not taken that part, but India has
Okay.
improved or increased its imports of petroleum, LNG, etc. from the USA. So that's what I would say in my opening remarks.
Okay. Professor Swaran saying, when Trump says that he's going to double it, substantially increase it, what's provoking him to do it? India's response was pretty much restrained, decent, polite, respectful.
But it is also true that fundamentally he seems to be miffed with the fact that the world is not kowtowing to his diktats. And he has been trying these various deadlines that he keeps changing. He's been trying tariff hikes, which he keeps changing. I remember at some point in time he had slapped 104% tariffs on China. Now he's giving extensions to China. He is planning to visit Beijing on 3rd of September. He has disallowed the Taiwanese president to land in United States. He cancelled the security dialogue with Taiwan. So he is approaching China in a very different fashion, and in that sense, separating India and Russia as two countries which he wants to push to the wall. And even Russia is not listening. India is, of course, very polite, but is not really listening to the diktats. Otherwise, we would have had the trade deal by now, clearly. And in that sense, it's not just the kind of discomfort that the rest of the world leaders have with President Trump. At home as well, some of the business houses have taken that to the federal court, and it's likely to go all the way to Supreme Court as to whether he can invoke national security and use 1978 Act of International Emergency Economic Powers to slap tariff hikes the way he has done. His own team, 2 days after 1st August deadline, and he announced 25% raise in tariffs on India. Secretary of State Mark Rubio described India as a strategic partner with which United States would like to build a relationship. 2 days before the 1st August deadline, the USTR, Mr. Greer, was saying that we might extend the 1st August deadline. Vice President JD Vance was in Delhi when this framework of what is to become bilateral trade agreement was to be signed was finalized. So even within his team, his own corporate sector, his own friends, allies, competitors, adversaries, and everybody is not confronting him directly, but he understands they are not going to kowtow to his dictates. And that makes him very frustrated. And I think also you can add the fact that more than 3 dozen times now, he's claimed his mediation in not just India, Pakistan, but also in 5 conflicts he's mentioning. And India has clearly, repeatedly clarified that it was just bilateral based on request from Pakistan. So he has reasons to be miffed, as Ambassador Shashank just mentioned, and that is making him really, ratchet up the whole conversation, which is not going to lead anywhere fundamentally other than redrawing the fundamentals of India-US relations potentially, which were now based on basic values, on democracy, on strategic interests, to now becoming far more transactional relationship. India will survive it, of course. But of course, it is also true that there will be some cost attached. Different estimates are talking about whether it is 10% hit that we will have, whether we will hit exports will have hit for first 3 months. Then our Ministry of Commerce, Finance and Industry, etc., will come in and step in to facilitate that exports are either facilitated or diverted to other countries. So there will be a definite cost. But remember, it is World Bank, it is IMF who are pegging that India's growth rate today is between 4.6 to 4.7%. India's inflation rate is lowest in last 5 years, 2.1%. So India will withstand some of these costs. Of course, some disruption will take place. There is no doubt. After all, United States is the biggest consumer in the world. Most countries love to export things there. But the relationship, which is bipartisan, institutionalized, I think that potentially could become disruptive. And I think President Trump perhaps is too narrowly focused on earning brownie points and not focusing on long-term relationship disruption that could happen in India-United States relations. And I think that is what India has been trying by showing restraint, that we can still save that relationship and go through this exercise. Otherwise, this is not the worst relationship. You
So
remember
you're
after
using the
nuclear
word disruption. You're using the word disruption. General Kulkarni, do you think that this can disrupt the larger Quad engagement in 2 by 2?
Thank you, Karthike. What the distinguished panelists have already spoken, without getting emotional and stating clearly that there are no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, only permanent national interests, knowing how the Americans have all along been behaving with the democracies, how Americans firmly believe in a one-point contact. They are world's richest democracy, but not the largest democracy. We know for years on how America has been with India, blow hot, blow cold. We know how exactly and why they want Pakistan. That Pakistan was important to the Britishers, and that is why in 47 it was created, and therefore taken over that role by the United States. The need for this country for its geostrategic location is extremely important for America. Firstly, and we saw how even around 1971 the need was felt because it was a hop, step, and jump for both Richard Nixon as also Kissinger to go as often, and we are facilitating moving up and down, and then therefore Pakistan became, and of course Pakistan part of the NATO, everything. Notwithstanding all that, the relationship between India and America has always been fluctuating. Much that we have been wanting to have good relations with America, and definitely not at the cost of Russia. That is something which I think we have always been maintaining, not at the cost of Russia, but definitely good relations with America. Firstly, not because China as an adversary, China as enemy, call it China as a neighbor, whichever way, we also have a balancing it. We also are slowly and steadily becoming the third largest economy, and therefore sustaining ourselves at that level also is very important. And therefore, our relationship with America has been to ensure that, yes, part of Ford, part of other relationships, we move along, but then expecting too much by America from us, that either, like what Bush once said to Pakistan, either my way or highway. Well, India is not my way or highway. India will decide its own strategic
Absolutely.
autonomy. And therefore, no one really can dictate that you will do what I want to do. But Karthikeyan, in this one sentence, look at pharmaceuticals, look at energy, look at the electronics. The tariffs aren't much. They aren't much, virtually nil. I would put it that way. And they constitute about $12 billion, $11 billion, and $4.5 billion
Okay.
with America. So Americans are not actually looking at it, and this just to ensure to show it more, maybe an ego, maybe whatever it may be. Well, he's an American president; he can do what he wants to do.
Okay, okay. Ambassador Shashank, my question is slightly different. There has been a seismic shift in American politics, isolationism, and there are other words to describe it. But why is American establishment questioning multipolarity? Whether non-alignment as read in the text or strategic autonomy as spoken in today's academia, India's foreign policy has charted its course. But is there a shift in Washington on this issue, sir? What's your assessment?
No, right from the very beginning, when India came up with its policy of non-alignment at that time, USA did not understand it. And it said that, well, if you're not aligned with us, you are against us. So that time also this policy was there, but they were willing to live with it because they knew that India's requirements for economic assistance, technical assistance, so huge that they were not prepared to take care of that. In any case, I think they had carved out Pakistan out of India only for this very reason, because they felt that India had other priorities. They didn't want India to go the way of China, but they also did not want India to become very friendly with Russia. So they wanted Pakistan in between as their military ally to keep needling India, China, Russia, Iran, and all the other regions. So that was the Second World War philosophy. Now, lately, America had agreed that Pakistan was making a fool of America. They were taking the billions of dollars from the United States, and the American soldiers were losing lives in Afghanistan and places, and Pakistan was directly involved in that. However, I think now America is not bothered because now they have taken a decision that they will not put boots on the ground. So therefore, they are not bothered about the Pakistanis killing the Americans. And they are saying that, well, we will use only the aerial power, they will use the space power and all that. And now they are realizing that China, whom they had supported very strongly in moving away from Russia, and Pakistan had helped them at that time. And Kissinger developed his Delhi belly and then went away to China, and Kissinger Nixon went to China and had the Shanghai Communique of 1972. Now, that remains that Pakistan and China at that time were very, very close to the Americans, and Americans gave technologies which were not being given to any of their other partners, which they were willing to give to the Chinese. And Pakistan, they were willing to overlook all misdeeds of Pakistan so long as it could play the role that America wanted them to play. I think this is the main situation that India is trying to befriend, but India is coming from a different position. India is coming from a non-aligned position to strategic autonomy, to multi-alignment, to a multipolar world. America doesn't want a multipolar world. They know that France and UK, which are very, very small countries, they were able to run their empires for hundreds of years. So the Americans say that, look, we are a huge country and we are not, we had the Monroe Doctrine for Latin America. Even the Brazilians and others are trying to go against that, so we'll take action against the Brazilians. Indians are now joining hands. Earlier, they joined hands with the IPSA, that is Brazil and South Africa. Still, we are talking of democracies and moving away with the group, with the countries of the South. But once we have joined hands with BRICS, America feels that now things are totally different. It's no longer a question of waiting for another year or 2 years, but we have to take action. And Trump wants Nobel Prize for Peace, and he wants popularity in America as a legacy of Trump, that they have made America supreme again. For
if wishes were horses, sir, if wishes were horses. Very quickly, I have run short of time. A minute to you, Professor Swaran Singh, a minute to you, General Kulkarni. My question to you is very simple. Are we entering into a hostile phase with the America, the one India witnessed in 70s and early 80s, sir?
I don't think so. That's not an option. And Ambassador Shashank would vouch my saying that in diplomacy, that is not the option one works on. We have gone through different phases. You remember after nuclear tests of India, there was a very, very deep problem between not just United States, but all major powers. We had 14 rounds of Jaswant Singh Stoltenberg talks. We came around and built a very strong relationship. I'm sure we will go through this as well. India is likely to make more concessions. Even in agriculture sector, India has already said we'll buy soybean. Potentially, we might offer cheese. We might offer condensed milk, etc. We'll find ways and means as to how finally arrive at some deal. But you have to wait and watch to make sure that you don't agree on somebody's diktats immediately. We'll have to propitiate. He's a large economy. He's an important partner for India. And I think likewise, United States and his team will also realize over a period of time, some indications are already there. They also value India's partnership, particularly as a counterweight to China and so on. So I think it will take time, but India will make concessions and America will begin to understand the value of India over a period of time. We will have the trade deal sooner than later.
Okay, I'm really sorry. I've really run short of time. I'm sorry, General Kulkarni. I would have loved to have you, but I'm being told I have to close the discussion. Thank you, all of you. So this was the first deep dive. But you stay with me as we slip into the short break. But when I'm back on the other side, we have a deep dive on Uttarkashi flood fury.